rolling, so anytime.
Hello, Margie. Take a deep breath.
Okay. It's like the tooth, is it out? And the problem with us people like me is that we don't stop talking when you get it started. It just goes on.
Well, that's the whole idea, Margie, and I know you've an awful lot. You and I know each other for a long time.
Correct.
There's a lot I know about you,
Yeah.
but there's a lot I don't know about you as well, and hopefully we'll cover some of that today here. Out of curiosity, your name is Mannion, I know, is a good West of Ireland name.
Yes.
Was there any reason you were named Margie?
Yes, as I understand it, that the name was popular in America, My Little Margie. And I think my dad liked it. He said if I had a daughter, he'd call her, name her Margie, Little Margie. So
Was that a song or something?
it was My Little Margie. There's a movie made on it actually, and all 5 pounds of me, I was indeed Little Margie.
You were a little baby then.
Yes, yes, all 5 pounds of me and a head of hair, I believe.
Talk to me a little bit, Margie, about where you were actually born. And I know in terms of mom and dad, you know, they were in America, and we'll get to that shortly. But,
Okay.
you know, where you were actually born.
Yeah, well, I was born in Ireland in the town of Glenamaddy. My parents lived in America and met here in Central Park, as I understand, and returned to Ireland. Both of them returned to Ireland on the Queen. I think it might have been, I forget. I'm not clear on which. Might be the Queen Mary, and instruments and complete house full of furniture. No house to go to except just furniture from the States.
And was the house they came back to in Ireland like a family home?
It was.
I know they built a house, but they came back.
Yes.
Whose family home did they come back to?
My dad was the oldest of 6 sons, and my grandmothers, I understand, wanted him to return and take it over. And
now, was there anybody living in the house at that time, or did Dad come back to the empty house? Were there any siblings or anybody there?
Yeah, there was. His brother was there, William, and he was running the thing for my grandparents, and he had to, in fact, teach my dad how to farm, and
You're doing grand. Yeah. But you said this house was a thatched cottage.
It was a thatched cottage, yes. So there was no house except that. So there were 3 people, and as I understand it, my dad was home for a while. They were in question whether they were going to stay. So my dad took off to Salt Hill to Galway and worked for a while there. He had worked for a newspaper as a paper handler in New York. And I think my mum might have been a little reluctant and wondering, should we do this or should we just go back? So I think they held off for a while. And my dad was I believe, many years older than my mum. And I think they decided one day, well, let's get married or whatever, or return. But my dad was determined to stay, and I think that he won out.
I got the impression from you that your parents felt they wanted to raise their children in Ireland.
Yeah.
Why would you think that was?
I think Dad was very, very positive about that. He felt that that he I don't know what it was, environment or what. But now I'm glad of it. That.
And you're very proud of being born in a thatched cottage.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any memories of it, of your thatched cottage, and was it different from, you know, the house that you would have moved into later on?
Oh yeah, well, I really don't remember living there at all. They built a bungalow on the grounds close by, but I remember my grandmother used to tell us, because my dad came from a family of 12 people, a set of twins, 6 sisters and 6 brothers. So there were 12 of them in all. And 12 children were raised from that cottage.
A good Irish family.
Yes, and my grandmother loved a flower garden. I believe it was quite beautiful.
That must be where you got your love of gardening from.
Well, I suppose, yeah.
I remember you telling me also, Margie, at one point, what the neighbour's reaction was to your dad building a house.
And a bathroom.
And a bathroom in the house.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, they used to say, well, God, Mannion is mad, isn't he funny? They thought that was quite funny. And as I believe it wasn't porcelain, I don't know what it was made of. But the water wasn't running, but I think they had to work out something.
And why would that have been considered so mad?
Well, I guess, you know, there was all thatched houses around in that village at that time, because now you're going back to, at that period in time, there are no houses left now in the area where I was born, hardly any. It's quite different, but there was a cluster of houses. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was unique.
That's the impression I got from conversations we've had in the past, that because people didn't have bathrooms in the house,
No,
I think it was even considered unhygienic.
yeah, well, they had outhouses, I think. That's what was used in those days, yeah.
If I take you back to those days, Margie, and almost ask you to close your eyes in a sense, what do you think your earliest memory of growing up in Glenamaddy would have been? I'm sure there's a few that come to mind, but...
Yeah, the school I went to, the national school, my grandfather built the school. He was a stonemason, and I always bragged about that. And I think I enjoyed watching him build stone walls, and I think I inherited my love of the rocks and stones from him.
Yes, you did. I know you've built your own stone wall outside your house here in Westport.
Yeah, I built 3 of them. In fact, I dug them with a pickaxe and backed my truck down, and had great fun doing it. And each time I placed a rock, I would say, well, gee, that wouldn't be good enough for him. He was a very neat, very organised man, and I adored him. And I spent a lot of time around him. And he was very instrumental in my life growing up. He taught me all the subjects I had difficulties with in school. And his brother was a teacher, so that kind of helped a lot. And we were buddies.
What did you call him?
Grandpa. Grandpa, yeah.
I have a nice image of Grandpa and Margie in tow everywhere she went.
Always, yes.
I've lost my train of thought there, but I just had that lovely image of Grandpa. Going back to school, Margie, you've said in the past too to me that, school was not necessarily the happiest place for you.
Absolutely not.
At least you're chuckling about it now.
Oh yeah. I think I was quite wild. I wanted to look. I think we were better dressed because we were considered American kids. We seemed to have a little bit more, but I was determined to be more like, if the children went to school without shoes, I had to do that. So I ended up hiding my shoes in the walls very often and picking them up on their way back. In summertime it was a custom to go to school without shoes. That's going back a long time, isn't it? I guess they couldn't do it now, they wouldn't be let, but it was springtime, you were allowed to kick your shoes off and just run through the playground.
Yeah, and would that have been to protect the shoes, or was it just a freedom of getting the shoes off? A
freedom of taking your shoes off because the weather would be so beautiful. But if you were caught doing that, of course, you'd be serious trouble.
Were you aware of your mom and dad having come from America? You said the neighbours sort of considered you were more American than Irish in a way.
Yeah.
How would you have been aware of that?
Well, I think they had the American. My dad wore his American clothes. He wore his hat and his camel hair coat and his selection of ties. Everything was. My mom wore hats and dressed in stiletto heels, and it was different.
Not something you would have seen in the west of Ireland too.
Absolutely not. And I remember she had a lot of beautiful satin dresses, and she ended up, I think, she gave them to her sister-in-law, who enjoyed them for the dances, because that was the
quiet man.
Like the quiet man.
At school again, Margie, taking you back as early as you can, different teachers. Do you have any specific memories of teachers, of kids in your class, of things, how you learned?
Oh yeah, I think the teachers are actually very good. They got their point across, I think, but there were times that we were just, our homework was not in order, we had just automatically stretched your hand out and wait for your little slap, and that was a lesson that you were going to learn. You knew what you would expect the next day if you didn't do get your homework done.
And how would you describe yourself as a student in school?
I think it was considered the black. I was wild, yeah. I think I was the only girl who played in the boys' yard because I was a tomboy, definitely, climbing the walls and being wild.
And talk to me about siblings, brothers and sisters, and I've met your brother Martin, but I'm not that familiar with, others in your family.
I had one older sister, Helen, and Helen was probably the bright, shining star of the family, and I was more. We were very different day and night, but I lost her a few years ago.
That's hard.
Yeah.
So if you were the wild one, would that mean she was the quiet one?
Well, she was more reserved, and she was more the intellectual. She was the one who got the blanket and sat under a tree and read a book. while I was more happy playing with whoever my dad had and working on the farm and potatoes and harvesting, and that was a big part of Ireland growing up, was the harvest dances. If you want to hear about that, that was where the fun began growing up.
And would you have been involved in the actual harvesting? You know, was that
Well,
part of one of your childhood chores in a sense?
Yes, I was. I was probably the only member of the family. I loved the earth. I always loved working with the help. That was my delight. I loved that. Yeah.
So tell me about the harvest dances.
Yes, we always celebrated big dance, and whoever was willing to give their house for to celebrate the end of the harvest. And all of the musicians, we all gathered together. And sometimes we had just, I think there was, if a person had a huge barn, they would clean out the barn and just, it was dancing all night long. And sometimes the gesture.
No, I didn't want you to damage it. Yeah, you're doing fine.
Okay. So that was fun. And we also celebrate St. John's night. That was also a great night. There was many activities.
With the harvest dances for a minute, and I'll come to St. John's. Maybe you could describe a little bit who'd be there, what kind of, and I know music, of course, is one of the important influences in your life, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But go back to the harvest and tell me a little bit more what would happen at the dance, who'd be there, and who the musicians were, and what kind of music would be played.
We were rich in musicians where I came from. We had many great fiddle players around me. I could name them off. And they were really good. Of course, my dad had several instruments that he had taken from America, and he played mandolin better than fiddle. And there were really good fiddle players that we all gathered around and celebrated the harvest. And whoever was good.
In traditional Irish style, like with set dancing.
Yeah. And then we had a local hall where we used to dance and learn dancing, and sometimes that would be made available for Céilís and dancing, so it was quite nice.
Another thing you've shared with me in the past is memories of your front garden and local musicians on a nice summer or spring day.
Oh yes, oh yes. My dad would gather all of the good musicians after Mass on Sunday and invite them down after 2:00 or 2:00 after dinner. Dinner was 1, Mass was over. And I think that's where it all began with me. Generally at that time we had dancing lessons on Saturdays and music lessons on Friday night, and then the music teacher came into our house on Sundays, and we were held captive in the parlour while we had our private lessons for the fashions that would be taking place. And then Daddy would have his group of friends outside playing, generally in the summertime, the bench, and that's where the music, I could really hear the music, and wish that I could be with them rather than being stuck with this music teacher.
I have a lovely image of you growing up, Margie, you know, whether you're with your grandfather soaking up everything he had to teach you, or with your dad, you know, with the music. They're very strong influences in your life.
Oh yes.
Your whole west of Ireland background, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, the men were very strong influences.
Yeah. And what instrument did you start playing yourself?
The fiddle.
Straight away?
Yes, there were 2 fiddles in the house, and that was it. And my grandmother's brother was a fiddle player, so I think the family got the influence of the fiddle from him. And there were many whistles in the area also, whistle players. And then there were people on my grandmother's side of the family, they were all Bernadette Kinney. She won prizes all over Ireland. And we had many people living close to us who played on Radio Éireann. They were so good. I mean, the influence was there. And my sister was a great violin player, but I would call her a violin player. She always won first, where I wasn't.
So you would call yourself a fiddle player and she was the violin player?
Oh, yes.
So talk a little bit more about that to me in terms of what she would play as opposed to what you played, or your different influences, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. She was more a violin player. She would play the coolin, and she always came home with first prize. And if I was lucky, my grandfather would bribe me to compete. So if he gave me 10 shillings, I would oblige him. And he'd say,
and 10 shillings went a long way.
That was a
in those
lot
days.
of money. And he said, if you do well now, you'll get 10 shillings. And I said, okay, well, I'll do my best.
And what would you do with
I come
10
up with second
shillings?
prize again and pin it on. It was always second prize.
What, did you get 5 shillings for the
Actually, no, he kept his word, but he had to
Good.
get permission from my grandmother, who was a little bit more tight, but he was happy to give it to me. He wanted me up there.
And do you remember what you would have spent the 10 shillings
Oh my
on?
goodness, that would last forever. Skipping ropes or whatever it is that you measured it out kind of thing.
So 10 shillings would have lasted you a very long
A
time.
very long time, but he was an easy touch for money. All I had to do was just stand beside him on a Sunday after Mass, and off I go.
So what else could you have bought with the 10 shillings? Skipping
Oh,
rope so you could
Oh
be
my
out
God!
playing with
I
your
think
friends.
marbles were a big thing. We loved jacks.
I remember the marbles too.
Yeah.
What games did you play with the marbles?
God, I forget how to play it now. But I remember I had a collection of them. Yeah,
There was some of the marbles with
colours.
were more valuable than others,
Oh,
weren't they?
oh yes, the larger marbles and the coloured marbles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so marbles and skipping ropes. And any sweets?
Oh, sweets. Yes. Then I had I set up a shop in my kitchen, so I sold my sweets. Then I was a little young entrepreneur there. So
So you made money, and then you made the money make money for you.
exactly.
You had your head screwed on.
That's what they say.
Would you ever have taken any formal lessons on the fiddle, Margie, or was it all?
Oh, I
right
did.
there?
Oh,
You
we did take from the age of 7. Yeah, classes every Friday night, and we had the same music teacher came into our house on Sundays. That was the torture. That was it.
Why was it torture?
Well, because I think that I always wanted to be with the fiddlers outside where my dad was playing. The music was entirely different, but we were always practicing for a fesh or something, and I don't know. I guess I was never much of a student, really, student type,
Yeah.
Sorry about that. The other one is under my chair. Can you see that? You're not going to see my feet.
It was just the noise. That's
The
all.
rattling. Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm a giddy old thing, I was always told there.
Where
Yeah,
were we
we're rolling
talking?
anytime.
What were we talking about?
You're playing
music
music outside
lessons.
the house.
Oh, lessons, music lessons.
Yeah.
Not your thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to get out on Sunday and get to the feshes and join the crowd, otherwise you stay at home. If you didn't compete, then that wasn't much fun. So.
But the informal session would have been something that
Oh,
you
yes.
were far more interested
Oh
in.
yes, yeah. I think hearing the music at the bonfire night and the party for the harvest parties, and I think that's where.
That's what I wanted to ask you a little bit now about, because you talked about the harvest night, which was obviously a celebration at the end of harvest.
Yes.
And then you mentioned something about St. John's Day.
St. John's
I'm not
night.
familiar with that.
Really?
No.
There was bonfire night.